in fact, the historian Stephanie Jones Rogers, in her recent book from 2019, They Were Her Property, documents through historical records how white women actually were slave owners, often because their father had died and bequeathed enslaved people to them, or they married a man who had enslaved people and they were co-owners with him. And part of what she documents from the narration of formerly enslaved people is that the white women who were slave owners were especially cruel in their treatment of their enslaved property. And part of the reason that she speculates this is that there was a kind of desire to prove their worth, right, as a worthy slave owner. And it was also a way that white women gained a kind of modicum of power in sort of brokering their leverage over enslaved people to pursue a more wealthy husband or to gain more power in the relationship. One reviewer of this work referred to the kind of treatment that white women exerted on their enslaved people as a kind of imaginative sadism. And that's a phrase that really struck with me because it's something that I recognized in my own family.
Hello everyone, I am Harrison. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, and happy Black Month to all my Black families. Let's keep it serious this month and every other month. Black history is American history. We must tell the truth. As someone who supports Black people fully, I say this loud. Schools must teach the whole story of the enslavement of Africans and American Africa. Put it in social studies and history classes for every grade. No hiding, no soft words. Tell about the hard life, the pain, the family is broken, and how American grew rich from black work that was stolen. Anything less is wrong. Black History Month should show the good things too. The winners, the smart people, the great work black people did. We talk about Madam C.J. Walker. She became the first woman to make herself a millionaire. George Washington Carver, the smart man who changed farming. Katherine Johnson, the mad woman who helped and sent people to the moon. These stories make our kids feel proud and strong. Too many white parents, especially some white women, do not want their kids to learn the real story of slavery and black pain. They say it hurt their kids, like learning facts is bad for their children. Every year, some parents get angry when teachers talk about slavery in details. They say it's too much or it makes white kids feel bad. It's not about being careful with young kids, it's about keeping white people comfortable and hiding the real truth from black kids. But we cannot stop there. We must teach the full story. We must teach the full truth. So guys, I want you to watch this video and I'm coming back for a better communication. Okay?
White womanhood and slavery, the role no one wants to talk about. But I'm going to teach it and we're going to talk about it. Now, before I get started, let me say this right now. This teaching is not about blaming people alive today. Let me reiterate that because I know many times when we teach about slavery, some white folk get offended because they think I'm blaming them. What I am doing as my job, I am here to teach. And part of American history is very ugly. And so it has to be taught, and has to be taught honestly. So, because if we can talk honestly, y'all, about the role that white men played in slavery, then we also got to talk honestly about the role that white women played and how they benefited from that system of slavery, even while living under patriarchy. So history is not about comfort, you all. It's got to be about truth. When slavery is discussed, y'all, many times white women are often placed in one of the two boxes. Either they're seen as they were helpless victims of a patriarchy because their husbands lorded over them and they had no say at all, or they are heroic abolitionists. That's either the two you see. But history rarely works in absolutes. Y'all know that, right? White women could be limited by gender and they were still empowered by their race, right? You know, I always say that they had the complexion for the protection. But those two things are not mutually exclusive. So ignoring this truth keeps us stuck in a myths that protect that system. But we're not living in no myths no more, fam. We need to know the truth that white womanhood wasn't just an identity, it was a social position. You understand? See, it symbolized purity, fragility, moral authority, civilization, right? That image helped justify why black people could be enslaved, controlled, punished, brutalized, while white women were framed as what? Something to be protected at all costs, right? White womanhood became part of the machinery of slavery. So yes, white women, they owned enslaved people. Yes, I want you to understand that fact. I know that fact surprises a lot of people, but white women owned enslaved Africans, especially widows, unmarried women, and elite women. Let's get into it. Enslaved people were inherited, bought, sold, and listed in wills under the women's names, under the white woman's name. In some slaveholding regions, and historians estimate that up to 40% of slaveholders were women. Let me reiterate that. Historians estimate that up to 40% of slave owners were women. Yes, these were not symbolic owners. They collected labor, they collected profit, and they controlled human lives. But here's the thing. You're saying, but these white women didn't have power. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. That's partially true that they didn't, but here's the real truth. There were laws called coverture laws, which limited white women's legal independence, right? But enslaved people were still beneath them. So white women were able to direct labor. They directed what had to be done on that plantation. They controlled the food and clothing that the enslaved Africans wore. They ordered punishment, yes. They could have them beat, whip, everything else. They also enforced obedience. You think these white women weren't mean? Smacking them slave women, them slave girls in the house? You think that these white women weren't mad that they knew that their white husbands were sneaking off to the slave quarters, raping those women? And they were going to take that out on that slave girl in the house? They may have been subordinate to white men, but these white women, they had absolute authority over the enslaved African. Absolute authority. Domestic slavery was not benevolent, you all. Meaning white mistresses controlled the enslaved people. She disciplined them, surveyed them, emotionally punished them, physically, and violated them. And I'm not saying all of them, because I don't know them all. But slave narratives repeatedly describe white mistresses as feared figures. And I bet them heifers was ruthless. You know they were. Ain't nothing more treacherous than a hateful ass racist white woman. Domestic spaces were not safe spaces. They were sites of constant control. Now let's talk about how complicit these white women were in sexual violence. Yes, these sweet little white women. They weren't usually the ones committing the sexual violence, but they were deeply complicit in it because they knew that their white men were out there raping enslaved young girls as well as the enslaved women. They punished the victims. They claimed the mixed race children as property, knowing that those mixed race kids were part of her husband's children, thus part of her family, but she didn't give a damn. Many times those white women knowing that those little mulatto children, mixed kids belonged to her husband, would even have those kids sold off or killed. Read a book, it's in history. The same books that they don't want you to know about. These white women, slave owners, also benefited from the increased value of enslaved people. So see, silence, it is not innocence. They being silent wasn't their innocence. Benefit is not neutrality, y'all. And they were also enforcers of racial order. White women played a key role in maintaining racial hierarchy beyond the plantation. They reported enslaved people. They identified runaways. They made accusations that led to brutal punishments. They policed black behavior in public. So the idea that white women needed protection from black people became a justification for racial terror, a pattern that continued long after slavery ended, y'all. These white women, they were teachers of racism, y'all. White women were the primary educators of the children. So where did the kids learn the racism from? They were taught they were superior. They taught their children. They taught their children that the enslaved African was inferior. They taught that they were property and belonged to them. This is how slavery reproduced itself, not just through chains, but through beliefs, y'all. Yes, there were some white women who were abolitionists. Yes. But they were the exception, not the rule. And opposing slavery did not always mean believing in black equality either now. Abolition does not erase the broader pattern of participation and benefit. Also, white women weren't just on the sidelines of slavery. They were beneficiaries, participants, enforcers, and moral coverers. Understanding this does not mean hatred, y'all. It just means historical maturity, y'all. Y'all gotta grow up. You gotta be mature enough to know what happened in history, right? You don't have to carry guilt for the past, white folk. But you do have a responsibility to understand it in its full context, because the stories we refuse to tell are often the ones shaping the present. And it happens all the time. And see, many of y'all, this is just a 7 to 10 minute teaching I'm doing. I could teach a whole semester course on the complicity of the white woman in chattel slavery in America. But I think it's just vitally important that you all understand that it wasn't just the white man who benefited and owned slaves. The white women were as complicit. And just like there were breeding farms where they would take the biggest of the enslaved African men and breed them with the enslaved African woman, basically making them have sex to have and birth bigger, stronger slaves. Those women knew about it. And many of those white women even participated in sexual behaviors with the slave men. Yes. So again, American chattel slavery, the role that white women played was as equally complicit and wrong and sinful and dirty and awful as the white counterparts. And that you should know. All right. Continue to like, share, and subscribe. I hope you learned something. I hope me teaching you makes you now want to do more research. Okay? Be blessed. Bye.
So we're looking at the population, the black community is 13%. So when people are learning to do hair, maybe it has nothing to do with just because you're black. It has to do with people are learning how to do the majority of the population's
That's always
hair.
been the excuse.
That's true, but
I'm just saying
that's
that
why
it
I
could
brought
be.
in the real
This is what I'm
historical,
saying, but we
specific,
see
and systematic
everything in
examples.
color. And when I've gone to board meetings, this is what bothers me. I go to a school board meeting, and they talk about white privilege and this. So you're telling my child, who's never been a part of Jim Crow law.
Black History Month should show the good things too. The winners, the smart people, the great work black people did. We talk about Madam C.J. Walker. She became the first woman to make herself a millionaire. Okay. George Washington Carver, the smart man who changed farming. Katherine Johnson, the maths woman who helped send people to the moon. These stories make our kids feel proud. This is racism. Stay working today from my side. We say no. We want real teaching that shows the bad parts of slavery and how it connects to problems today, like unfair jobs and poor neighborhoods. Hiding the past does not help. It helps the hurt. It keeps the hurt going. To my black people, your history is strong, hard, and full of pride. This month, celebrate the good wins, dance, make things, lift each other up, but do not let anyone say the hard parts are too much or not for kids. Our old people went through hell so we can live better. Teaching the truth shows respect to them. So, teachers, parents, fighters keep asking for true school lessons. Support black teachers. Ask for books and videos that tell black stories, right? And to the people fighting against it. Your uncomfortable feeling is not the same as real hurt. Truth sets us free. Happy Black Month, everyone. Let's keep fighting for fairness. If you like this, like the video, write a comment, subscribe, and share it. Thank you.